The Diaz brothers, Nate and Nick, are two of the most entertaining, toughest, and funniest fighters in the history of MMA. They are both known for doing their things their way, not caring about the opinions of other people about them, and this no-nonsense nature has gained them a die-hard and loyal fan base like no other. During the time of their career in the MMA, they have both had their fair share of headlines. Both are forces to be reckoned with in the UFC and are known to always provide fans with some of the most memorable moments in MMA and out of the octagon. Looking at how impressive the careers of the Diaz brothers are to date, it makes it difficult to select the top fights of the two amazing fighters, but I have tried to narrow it down to 5 each. These 5 best moments of each of them will get you stunned. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Starting with Nate Diaz. Nick Diaz was more famous than his younger brother, Nate, due to his early UFC career, but Nate Diaz became a superstar suddenly when he fought against MMA's biggest, Conor McGregor. Nate is delighted in pleasing his audience in every of his fight. When Nate enters the UFC cage, you are to expect one thing: an offensive war. He is as aggressive as his brother Nick, and he is always intending to end the fight even before the final bell sounds. 10. UFC 196, Nate Diaz beating McGregor. This is probably not just one of the greatest fights in Nate's career, but also be counted when making a list of the greatest matches in the history of UFC. Before the fight, Nate Diaz called out Conor McGregor at UFC on Fox 17 the weekend after McGregor had just won the featherweight title with a knockout win over Jose Aldo in just 13 seconds. McGregor was scheduled to fight against Rafael dos Anjos for the lightweight title at UFC 196, but Rafael had to be withdrawn from the bout due to a foot injury about 10 days before the fight. The UFC had to fix up another match, of which Nate Diaz stepped in to take up the challenge. On March 5, 2016, at UFC 196, the first round ended with McGregor dominating over Nate, and come round 2, Diaz came out throwing calm and calculated 1 and 2 combinations that gradually slowed McGregor down. It didn't take too long before Nate took McGregor to the mat, threw punches at his face, and eventually locked up a submission via a well-timed rear naked choke. Number 9. Nate Diaz submitting Kurt Pellegrino by a triangle choke. Nate Diaz has won a total of 11 fights throughout his professional career, but of them all, submitting Kurt Pellegrino in a fight on April 2, 2008 is probably the most famous. Kurt Pellegrino was seen to dominate over Nate Diaz in the first round as he landed Nate Diaz on the mat and took his back immediately, controlling him for most of the first round. The second round started, and roughly in 3 minutes, Pellegrino lifted Nate Diaz and tried to slam him on the mat. Nate Diaz, smart of him, quickly wrapped his limbs around the upper region of Pellegrino's body, securing one arm and his neck and locking in a tight triangle choke as the two met mat. He began celebrating immediately, knowing he had caught Pellegrino and was seconds away from victory. He showed this by raising the double middle finger, which is now known as the infamous Diaz double bird salute, his trademark brashness before submitting anyone. Number 8. Nate defeats Cowboy, wins by a unanimous decision. Nate Diaz's bout against Donald Cerrone at UFC 141 is also one of the biggest fights in his career. Cerrone was cruising at the time, having won in his first 4 appearances in the UFC. During their pre-fight face-offs, Diaz in his brash nature knocked Cerrone's trademark cowboy hat off his head, which got Cerrone boiling in anger. The fight started with Cerrone running across the cage, swinging wildly and missing, which made it clear that Diaz's pre-fight antics had rankled him. Cerrone opted to flip off Nate instead of touching gloves. Going into the third round, both fighters stared at each other from opposite ends of the octagon. Nate reflected on earlier when Cerrone flipped him off, then returned the gesture before having a dominant final round. Perhaps the most memorable moment of the bout was at the start of the round 3, where Diaz famously flipped Cerrone off, knowing he had his foe right where he wanted him, and continued his barrage until the close of round 3. Nate won the fight by a unanimous decision. Number 7. Nate Diaz TKO'd Gray Maynard in round 1. Nate Diaz had just come off from a 2-fight losing streak and was set to settle the score with Gray Maynard, a rival that he had since 2007. He met Maynard for the 3rd time on the Ultimate Fighter 18 finale. Nate came out extremely confident, knowing what was at stake. Maynard took him down to the mat and Nate quickly returned to his feet. He then began unloading heavy 1-2 combinations on Maynard. This led to a TKO in just round 1. Number 6. Nate Diaz vs Jim Miller. Who is the next to face Benson Henderson? The fight between Nate Diaz and Jim Miller was one of a kind. It was critical for both of them as it was to decide who would go on to face Benson Henderson for the UFC lightweight champion title. In the past 24 bouts of Jim Miller, he had never been stopped within the fight's allotted time, but little did he know that this match scheduled for May 5th, 2012 was going to be a streak break for him. Diaz's grappling skill came into play yet again when he was able to successfully negate the offensive wrestling of Miller and lock up a guillotine choke in round 2. The victory would extend his winning streak to 3 and eventually lead to a showdown with Henderson months later. This fight might not look so spectacular, but it confirms the fact that Nate is capable of executing the impossible. Now, off to Nick Diaz. Nick is known to never shy away from the hard fights. He took the path that many didn't want to take and he credited himself for this. He once mentioned that, in his career, he has fought the heavy hitters while many rather took relatively safer fights. Nick's style of fighting usually revolved around 3 things: wit, edginess, and most importantly, fury. The next 5 top moments are 5 of the most memorable events in his career. Number 5. UFC 135. Nick defeats Gomi via a gogoplata submission. In 2007, Nick Diaz went over to Pride 33 to face Takanori Gomi at UFC 135. The match was seen to be filled with a heavy exchange of blows between the two fighters. Diaz tasted Gomi's power early in the first round as he was sent tumbling to the mat by a blistering right hook. He did more than just survive that scare, promptly returning fire and rocking Gomi with some punches of his own. After a while, Gomi got tired and Nick used this opportunity to pull off one of the Raiders' submission in MMA, gogoplata submission, in the second round. Unfortunately, the fight was not counted as he failed the drug test. A lot of THC was seen in his system and he was said to have been high when fighting. Number 4. Nick Diaz, Georges St-Pierre fight. UFC 158 was a stage of the fight between 2 of the very best welterweights in the world. The build-up to UFC 158 provided many Nick soundbites and had the whole MMA community waiting in anticipation to see this fight. Many expected St-Pierre and Diaz to put on a high-level mixed martial arts match, but instead, fans were treated to an eventful, lopsided decision victory that consisted of St-Pierre continuously wrestling Diaz to the ground and holding a favorable position. Nick fought in typical Diaz fashion here. This match got a lot of attention because many believed that Nick's mastery in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu could help him withstand St-Pierre's powerful wrestling. Unfortunately, it wasn't so. He suffered one of the biggest losses in his career that day, March 16, 2013. Number 3. Nick Diaz defeats Paul Daley via TKO. This fight is known to be one of the most action-packed MMA matches in the history of Strikeforce. The match lasted less than the time duration of a full round, where both of them threw hard punches at each other with the intent of knocking the other out in an unusual style. After many exchanges, Daley gave Diaz a stunning left hook that crashed him to the mat. Diaz quickly recovered and put together a brutal 1-2 combination that in turn stunned Daley. He threw several more powerful strikes from the top position that the referee was forced to signal the end of the bout, with Diaz emerging as the winner. Number 2. Nick Diaz vs Robbie Lawler. Surprisingly, no one could have predicted how Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler's first game would play out. Known for his confident nature, Nick started his fight against the feared striker with verbal attacks. Nick fought in a completely unexpected way. Not only did Nick get his footing, but he pushed forward and was out striking Robbie. An open-handed strike followed by the 1-2 combination. Nick then won by a second round knockout, creating a fan favorite upset. Number 1. Nick Diaz vs Anderson Silva. Since these were the 2 most popular fighters in the UFC, this fight was the most anticipated. As soon as the fight started, Nick Diaz ran to the center of the octagon, took off his gloves and started barking at Silva. Even considering Diaz's reputation, what happened a minute after the fight was an unbelievable sight. Nick laid on the mat in a pose every fighter fan could instantly remember. Moments later, he even turned his back on Silva, earning him a warning from the official. At the end of the fight, Anderson Silva won the fight by a unanimous decision from the judges. This bout would always be remembered thanks to the Diaz's antics. What can you say about the Diaz brothers? Do you know any memorable moment that wasn't mentioned here? Share them below in the comments section. I'm sure you enjoyed this video, so do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you are yet to. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can be notified when more content like this one are uploaded. See you in the next video. Goodbye.